Although the universe has evolved considerably since its inception, the human mind is never satisfied as the yearning for more knowledge continues to grow, as does our human desires. In spite of this, not many can answer questions such as what is the purpose of life? Who am I? Where will I go? Is the physical death of the body end of everything in life? And why is all this happening only to me? The answer to all these questions can be derived through the learning of yoga. And that is the purpose of this video, to talk about the true philosophy of yoga along with its history with me, your host, Varun. Now let us start with the introduction of yoga. The word yoga literally means to bind, join, attach, and yoke. It also means union and communion with oneself as an individual. It is defined as the body, mind, and soul. The practice of yoga integrates the body with the mind and then the mind with the soul, which can be subtly put in one plane as the body, mind, soul travels in one plane all along. Now, to talk about the history of yoga, yoga is one of the 6 orthodox systems of Indian philosophy, which is said to be the mother of all sciences and the inception of philosophy in general. It is in these 6 orthodox systems that even the Sankhya Yoga or the Sankhya philosophy exists, which I've also spoken about in one of the other videos, and just click on the card at the end of the video to watch it in detail. Now back to this video. Yoga talks about the perfect way of living life by mastering the mind in the right way. Yoga is a science as well as an art in deriving all possible answers to everyone. It is the most ancient and sacred tradition known to all of humanity. The ancient science of yoga was believed to have been developed before the old civilization itself, but with many different names that suited the custom at that particular point of time. People who used to live during the formative years of ancient India, that is before the age of Vedas itself, created the system of yoga with their own individual names. Through their own personal experience in yoga, these ancient sciences developed and was eventually passed on from its masters to students and then from generation to generation. Yoga was discovered as old as 40,000 years ago or beyond it in many ancient scrolls. But the conclusive birth date of yoga has relatively remained unknown, but its importance through the evolution of time has remained, as it has also been confirmed by its references in Rig Veda, which is considered to be the oldest known text to mankind as a whole. Now, when we talk about yoga, you can associate the name with the father of yoga known as Sage Patanjali. It is believed that Sage Patanjali lived around 5,000 years ago and was the first person to systemize the science of yoga, which until then was being handed down by word of mouth from one generation onto another. He developed the famous stages of yoga known as the Yoga Sutras. He is famous for being the one who made yoga readily available to the common man and the yoga that we know today as the modern day yoga. And he also formulated one of the very simple analogies of yoga known as the yoga tree. A tree is used as an analogy to explain the structure of yoga. The yoga tree is always compared with that of a large banyan tree. Now, why a banyan tree? A banyan tree is one of the oldest living trees in the world and also has an excellent life expectancy. And it has a pretty good reason to it. It has large roots with its thick trunk and snake-like branches that reach down low enough to invite climbers to reach awe-inspiring heights. Thus, yoga too in many ways reaches down to exactly where you are and takes you to your heights, supporting you with its trunk, thereby building you a solid foundation and establishing your very core. Now, what is special about yoga? Practicing the art of detachment, attaining the evenness of mind. This is the very definition of yoga in the Bhagavad Gita. It is a process of inner poise that leads to self-mastery. It is the conquest of anger, sensitiveness, and pride, and ambition that leads to maximum attainment of life. A person who is trained in yoga works with perfect serenity and an even-mindedness where he or she is indifferent to the results. He who acts by the virtue of inner law is on a higher level than that one of whose actions are controlled by one's desires. Those who go and do their works for the satisfaction of their desires go to the region of a self-proclaimed heaven, but those who pursue the science of true wisdom that is mentioned in the yoga goes to the eternal life that truly exists. Now, how does yoga contribute towards achieving the road to eternity? Yoga is about discipline and seeking refuge in the intelligence. One who has established in the true wisdom of yoga casts away both good and evil. Only such a person is fit to be called a yogi. Therefore, yoga is skill in action as per Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. One rises to a status higher than moral ethics with its distinction of good and evil firmly set. A selfless human being is incapable of evil as they are even-minded, yet they perform their duties to their fullest extent. These questions cannot be answered for a knowledgeable mind, but only an ignorant will be able to question these in order to get the infinite truth. It is therefore foolish to search for the eternal truth with a view of finite objects, and that is where the yoga comes into play. Now, yoga can be viewed in many different points, and yoga has many viewpoints on many different things as well. First, let us look at yoga's view on religion. Through the various religions in the world, people have claimed to have seen God. They have also said that God has certain rules and regulations in life, and if you do not follow them, it would be harmful for your life. Now, what does yoga have to say about that? Now, a human being who has mastered the art of yoga will realize that the Supreme exists in one's own soul, and that can be attained with a stringent act of detachment as they have understood it and they are aware of their true essential nature instead of just their physical nature. However, you cannot overlook the fact that there are many misconceptions of yoga. In modern times, yoga has always been viewed as performing a series of stretches and floor exercises, but the problem is mostly that people forget the metaphysical truth that yoga provides through the process of yoga in general. However, yoga in Indian history is more than just a set of physical exercises and has an eternal meaning towards it. We need to reflect on what yoga really means and how we should manifest it in our thoughts, words, and most importantly, in our activities. Now, these things that mostly cause a difference for a person who is trying to establish themselves in yoga is because reality is much different than what they had expected. And as Plato's quote goes, no one is hated more than he who speaks the truth. You see, many people look at yoga as a difficult journey and they go through a very stringent possible that is just not suitable for an up-and-coming individual who wants to set foot in the path of yoga. Now, you would have seen a lot of ads that say, join this yoga course and you would get your spiritual awakening in 10 days, which, needless do I need to tell you, is quite not possible at all. Because when one believes in this and goes into the path of yoga, they realize how tough it is and their expectations are met with harsh reality, and hence they turn away from yoga and return dejected to their unconscious life that they had before. This is the primary reason why many people lose the priceless opportunity to attain the philosophy of yoga. Naturally, the mind is weak and is not an enjoyer of hardships, but one needs to realize that if one can stretch out and thrive during the early days, then the path of yoga is going to make you more blissful and more meaningful in life. Since the process is hard, many lose heart at the start and become disgusted with the path of yoga itself. This process must be undertaken with a great deal of enthusiasm and joy, as only that would lead to purity in life. For this, the initial purpose is to free your mind, since most things that you would experience would be very different to what you had expected. And one must always be prepared to adapt oneself instead of waiting for it and suit your mental process. Now, when you proceed on this path smoothly, with an eager mind, you will understand things gradually. They will become much more clearer, and you would see sunshine, and the grass becomes more greener every day as you keep progressing. Now here, the one thing we have to understand is the importance of your thoughts in yoga. We need to reflect on what yoga really means and its core definition and how it should be manifested in our day-to-day lives. This effort consists of a series of small steps and not one giant leap. If there is a contradiction between our thoughts and life, then it is not real, as we have heard it, but we have not experienced it. Now, whatever you think eventually comes out, not only in words, but also in actions. How do you get up in the morning? How do you start your day? How do you fulfill your tasks? And how do you deal with people around you? How do you respect them? How do you speak to them? All these questions relate to which tradition you can follow, but your life has to be pure. Yoga can show you how to live a pure life regardless of your differences by new ways of thinking to live a simple yet effective life, such as our day-to-day activities of how we eat, how we sleep, how we work, and how we spend our free time. The real change is the change of lifestyle. It requires change of attitude with a path made of principle and character. It only works if you have a mental goal which keeps you alert and on your toes throughout your life. And that is our very duty, and it should be experienced and not thought. Now in yoga, the views of God are very different to what a common man has. In yoga, the saying is that the God exists within you and you do not need to reach for it externally. The Atman, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, the inner self for all beings and the entire universe is nothing but the cosmic consciousness without names or forms or beginning or end. But the question remains, how does one connect to something without name, form, or qualities? We can only love something if we are able to establish a relationship with it and if we can open our hearts, right? Well, there is a catch to it as per the yoga. The ultimate goal of yoga is, yes, indeed, liberation, and as everyone would know, freedom has a price that you have to pay, and that price is discipline. This is the same process that is mentioned in other Indian philosophies as well, such as the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. But before we go there, let us understand what the philosophy of yoga really means. A person who understands yoga sees life through its many stages and it's not bothered by the ever-changing nature of it. Now allow me to explain there a bit. The physical body, starting with the birth, enters into the adolescent age, further blossoming into youth and then experiencing the youth from the age of 18 all the way to 35 years. Post the age of 35 up till the age of 50, the body starts to show signs of slowing down in many aspects, both mentally as well as physically. Post 50 years, the body decays a little bit and shows signs of fatigue, mental weakness, and this starts the beginning towards old age. During the final years of the body, it starts its decline process as the bones become brittle, movement becomes slower, and your mind becomes much more fragile. This is the usual cycle of life for any human being. However, a yogi is not caught in this vicious circle of life and death that is subject to pain and suffering, as a yogi transcends this process. For a person who practices yoga, one sees a far greater purpose to be achieved in life rather than caught in this circle, as they focus on aligning the body, mind, and soul in one plane. To align this in one plane, and the process is known as yoga. And this process, there are 4 key elements that constitute yoga. 1. Exercise. 2. Breathing. 3. Diet. And 4th, our thinking. In yoga, it is said that the Supreme has created this human body with a view that it has to be the best machine that is ever made in this universe. In order to activate this machine to its fullest potential, a human being needs a manual in life, and that manual is metaphysical truth that exists in practices such as the Bhagavad Gita and yoga itself. The purpose of this machine, the human body, is to attain a divine entity known as the soul. Hence, one has to be fully equipped with all necessary requirements and a mind intent on the journey to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now let us take a look at these 4 points in detail. Exercise. The word exercise is the very model upon which the modern day gym was built upon. When we take a look at gym today, all the exercises which do not include the heavy lifting is derived through yoga. Through the gym, the one thing that we desire to accomplish is muscle gain, because a lot of us feel that muscle gain is the maximum level of fitness a person can have. However, in the teachings of yoga, it begs to differ, as it says that muscle development does not necessarily mean physical fitness as a whole, because it does not add to your mental fitness. Now, gym focuses on training the external body, but yoga is a combination of your mental, physical, and spiritual body that aligns itself together for a cosmic purpose. These exercises in yoga are designed not only to develop the body and make it more flexible, but also to broaden your capabilities as an individual. In yoga, the exercises are denoted as asanas, known in Sanskrit, and during the practice of yoga, the mind should be completely relaxed and focused on one single contact. Every asana in yoga has a scientific justification towards its purpose, as the word asana itself means steadiness. Now, the main purpose of yoga is to increase your flexibility, as the theory in yoga is the more flexible you are, the younger you feel in life. Now, your physical body just becomes an object if you achieve this, and nothing else, as your mind is firmly in your control alone. This is the main reason why these asanas are so important, because you can only perform these asanas if your thought is fixed on one particular object, which helps you to be stable and balances all the emotions that you have in life. Throughout the teaching of yoga, there is a great emphasis on the control of one's mind. And that is how we are going to the second thing, known as breathing. In breathing, the Sanskrit word for that known in yoga is pranayama, and pranayama is completely science, as it refers to breathing, and it literally means control of your own life. Prana means life, which is the most subtle energy present in this universe. If you're able to control that with a one-pointed devotion, then you can control anything in life. Through the prana, all the physical elements of the body comes under your control. This is why a person with abundant pranic energy looks radiant and oozes an energy that is unmatched to the other. When such a person does ordinary things, it seems extraordinary to ordinary people. There are 3 basic types of breathing. Clavicular breathing, which is also known as the collarbone type of breathing, which is the most shallow and worst type of breathing. The shoulders and the collarbone are raised while the abdomen is contracted during inhalation. Maximum effort is made, but minimum amount of air is obtained. Now, the second type of breathing is known as intercoastal breathing, and it is done with the rib muscles expanding and the rib cage, and its second type of incomplete breathing. Now, the third thing is known as deep abdominal breathing. This is known as the best form of breathing, as it brings air from the lowest to the largest part of the lungs in your body. When breathing is slow and deep, only then it is made proper use of. Now, using any of these 3 types will make the process of breathing incomplete. Yogic breathing is a combination of all three, beginning with a deep breath and continuing the inhalation through the intercoastal and clavicular areas. Breathing in and out slowly is the art of breath control in yoga. The abdomen should expand outwards as you inhale, and the abdomen should contract when you exhale, much like the balloon inflation and deflation. Now, what should a yogi eat in a third stage known as a diet? One should have a certain knowledge of foods consumed to have a balanced diet. Scientists say that the type of foods that you eat will influence the thoughts you generate. When you consume good food, your mind responds in a calmer way than usual. There is a cycle in nature known as the food chain, with the sun being the source of energy for all things on this planet. The sun nourishes the plant that is eaten by the animals. The animals are further eaten by other animals, or in some cases, us human beings. The food that is obtained directly from the sun's nourishment has the highest value for the human body. However, the food value obtained from the second-hand source of nutrition cannot be held in the same step. In yoga, there is an emphasis on the quality of food than the quantity of food consumed. As the popular saying goes, eat to live and not live to eat. Scientists say that the first-hand food obtained from the nourishment of the sun has a better digestion than the second-hand foods, which is more difficult to digest. The greatest nutrition plan as per the yoga is a simple diet of natural fresh foods. But also, you have to note the important thing is any change in your diet should happen naturally and not be forced, since you need to give your body enough time to get accustomed to this sudden change and pattern in food. That is one of the main reasons why you and those who seriously pursue the path of yoga would abstain from the consumption of meat, fish, eggs, onion, garlic, coffee, smokes, alcohol, and drugs, or any other such toxic products. Now, the fourth stage, let us see how a yogi thinks. In yoga, there is a high emphasis on Buddhi Yoga, which is the intellect, since only the intellect can discriminate the difference between illusion and reality. Much like how only when the water is still can you see the bottom, similarly let the human mind stay still to understand the truth of eternal life itself. In yoga, the highest form of realization is knowing your inner self as a person. The process of achieving this serenity is through meditation. When the mind is focused on too many things, there exists no time in such a person's life. But for a person who has realized the self, the aspect of time, space, and the world in general is again just an object. Therefore, a yogi is someone who goes beyond that, as he or she is verily limitless. Now, that is the perfect state of meditation. Now, meditation has been described by many people with different interpretations and different theories, but in reality, meditation cannot be defined at all, as it is an individual experience. Though it may be up to an individual, and the path which two people take may be different, the destination is one, as they are united in the process of attaining the self. The very definition of meditation is focusing on one single object without any alternatives in mind. This could be sitting in a cross-legged position with your eyes closed, or it could be a racer who is focused in finishing the next lap, or it could be a singer who is entirely focused on the art of singing, or it could be a batsman or a sportsman whose mind is only intent on following the ball, or it could be people like you and me who are focusing on one particular object with all our energy without any alternative. Now let us look at what is the duty that yoga asks us to serve. The path of yoga doesn't necessarily mean abstaining from your daily life, because in the philosophical book of Bhagavad Gita, as well as the yoga, it says that one must always be focused on duty, and only when you remain intent on achieving your duty will you be able to contribute to the society in a much better way. A true yogi is someone who doesn't find the difference between wearing an orange drape or wearing cut-off jeans, because they realize that a true yogi is someone who is focused on the inner self than just the appearance of the physical body. Thereby, the path of yoga is not to deviate you from your individual path, but it is to help you attain peace and harmony in whatever your individual path may be. This, yes, is much harder than it sounds. There is a certain thing that is known as the deception of the mind. Sometimes it prohibits us from getting a glimpse of reality. It is like the truth has been before you all along, and your mind acted as a shield to veil the utmost truth in your life. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says, strive for yoga to achieve a sense of alertness and be focused on every single one of your steps. If this is achieved, then you would attain a state of awareness that is not easily achieved by everyone. Before you choose the path of yoga, always ask yourself, why do you need to choose it? What is the purpose behind your choice? Think hard about this very decision and try to ask yourself as many questions as you possibly can. Once you get the answer to these, then never ever deviate from it, as now you would have attained a certain sense of clarity. Once obtained, do not delay the process even for a single moment. Fix in your mind that this is going to be your entire life without any alternatives in your mind. But here, before we do that, we have to first understand our human mind. The mind comes into a lot of confusion very frequently, and this is mainly because the mind always wants to take the easy way out in any given situation. The mind follows the senses of the human body, namely sight, touch, sound, smell, and taste. Whichever satisfies these senses in the best possible way, the mind opts for that particular path. Through yoga, these senses will not be satisfied, and due to that, the mind pulls a trigger on progressing in this journey. It is like the mind prefers to pedal downhill of a mountain rather than pedal uphill. Your duty is just to make the mind pedal up the mountain, and your mind will take care of the rest the moment it is given work to do. Now, the mind can only think in terms of before, now, after, a past, present, and future. But according to the yoga, the reality or the eternal truth exists beyond time and space itself. Time and space is nothing but just an obstacle that covers or blocks the path of reality. When the mind is being directed towards a goal that exists beyond time and space itself, that is the mind that is used well. Now, yoga says that the final liberation for a human being is to be liberated from time and space itself, as only such a person would have seen the eternal truth. Because much like what Albert Einstein himself once said, time is indeed nothing more than just an illusion. There is a general consensus that says people need to evolve into a better future with greater technology and with a better mindset. However, in reality, the human mind needs to work as sharp as how it was in ancient times, because that would give us an idea of how twisted our mind is, because we are searching for something that does not exist in the future, as the human minds in the past have used their minds to their fullest possible potential. At the beginning, a neophyte is not used to the pain and struggle that such a strenuous path of yoga poses in front of an individual. This is natural, as this process of dejection is common for everyone who wants to know the truth of life. That is the same process that Arjuna is being asked to go through by Krishna on the battlefield of Bhagavad Gita. These initial difficulties will vanish as you gain strength day by day. Always keep in mind that the mind has the finite and limitless, immeasurable and imperishable possibilities that will help you attain anything you want in life. Success is sure to one who does a little bit of sacrifice. Much like the famous saying goes, if you want to be great, then serve. Because when you serve, you transcend the finite things and go towards an infinite reality. The absolute reality of yoga is nothing but the universe is Brahman. Some say Atman, some say Purusha, but in English it is known as the soul. All these have one thing in common. It is infinite, it is eternal, and it is the supreme reality of the world. Now the world has a starting point, right? That starting point is believed to have been created by Brahman, who is the supreme, and the inception of the world was arrived and designed from there. This is the very supreme that is beyond all qualities or attributes, beyond subject and object, and to be the source of that intelligence and bliss. The Brahman is always the only eternal truth that exists in this universe, and how we perceive it depends on our individual self. It remains unaffected by nature and doesn't constitute anything in nature at all, as it is present outside it. Brahman is not the personal God or an individual deity. However, it is the ultimate reality of life itself, which does not have a form, beginning, or end. Brahman cannot be defined or known by any process of intellect. The ancient sage Shankaracharya once said, Brahman is real, but the universe isn't. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says the same, wherein the world is unreal, just an illusion, and the only real thing is the soul, which is the Brahman. Now, what is the difference between Brahman mentioned in Yoga and the Upanishads and the Atman mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita? Brahman is the unchanging, constant creator of the universe, and the Atman is the individual consciousness which needs to be attained by every single individual. Brahman, however, does not mean your personal God. Oh no. The personal gods are present across the world in various religions, traditions, cultures, and beliefs about which the Yoga or Bhagavad Gita does not even make a comment, as it focuses its entire teaching towards the supreme reality of Brahman. Now, how do we attain it? This can be attained through a process of eliminating avidya, known as ignorance. This ignorance creates a maya known as illusion around us, which is constantly changing and keeps us unaware of the reality. We have used the intellect to overcome that ignorance and veils our consciousness. For that, there are 4 different parts of yoga. The 4 parts of yoga, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, are known as Karma Yoga, path of action, Bhakti Yoga, path of devotion, Jnana Yoga, path of knowledge, and Raja Yoga, known as the process of how yoga works. Karma Yoga. This path of yoga is known as yoga of action. It involves the performance of one's own duty and carrying out all the work with a complete renunciation, and that is without the expectation of a result. Such a person has no thought of a personal reward and becomes selfless in one's own works. This thereby leads them to strive harder to make the world a better place than they found it, even if it is just a small amount of contribution. This yoga can be practiced throughout the day without any rituals. Secondly, we come to Bhakti Yoga, known as path of devotion. This is the devotional approach of yoga, which is predominantly prevalent in modern times. This approach is without a shadow of doubt one of the easiest forms of yoga to practice. In this form, one has desires, one is bound by actions, but turns to God to channel their emotions in the hope of betterment in the future. At least that is how it is perceived in modern times. This path consists of importance of rituals and, most importantly, a belief towards God. In olden ages, this form of yoga was not revered at all, as their minds were strong enough to carry out actions and contribute to the society. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse that says, performing all actions is a much righter cause than prostrating before a god. Through the performance of action, you realize the supreme and not an individual godhead. However, in modern times, due to the lack of mental stability, people find it harder to do all their works without desires and hence opt for an easier approach in life. And many people seem to be pursuing this form, which is not wrong, but to believe that this is the only form is a tad bit wrong. Now, thirdly, we have the Jnana Yoga known as the path of knowledge. This is the most important path of yoga. It talks about the intellectual approach on how you need to analyze life itself. By a lot of philosophers, this path is considered to be the hardest, as here one has to question oneself as much as one questions others. Through the Vedanta, there is a central theme that says liberation cannot be attained by rituals, by action, or by charity, but only through a personal intuitive experience. A sharp intellect that is not clouded by emotion and focused on one single object is necessary for the persuasion of the path of knowledge. It is this very intellect that has the ability to realize the reality of this universe, and that is the path of knowledge. And it is very essential to be applied in the path of action, as they both go hand in hand. Finally, we have the Raja Yoga. This is a scientific theory and a step-by-step process on how yoga must be performed, how it has to be mastered, and most importantly, how to channel your inner energy and how it has to be awakened. This particular yoga would be elaborated in detail in one of my future episodes. The aim of yoga. Let us see what the aim and the true meaning of yoga is. It is not to preach religion, but to help you understand the purpose of life. That cannot be preached, as that has to be experienced by every individual. This truth can be achieved only by a step-by-step process with individual findings of the eternal truth over the course of time. A yogi not only teaches but also practices the art of teaching. The aim of yoga is to join the individual soul that identifies itself with the Supreme, and that is beyond the ever-changing consciousness of the mind and intellect in life. Most importantly, all our desires have to be restrained through the process of yoga. And that is why the yoga says throughout that the true wisdom of an individual is knowledge of the self. Everyone is looking for some sort of happiness that is definitely going to go away one day. And when someone realizes this, that no object or experience would bring you complete satisfaction to the mind and end our desires for good. In the modern world, we always claim that something is missing in life, and we look for happiness everywhere except the only place where true happiness exists, which is right within you. Because in reality, the self is only pure consciousness that unites us with the Brahman, which is the eternal, and takes us away from the land of reality. Last but not least, the yoga talks about the conquest of death. There is a general belief that says after death, life continues in either hell or heaven, based on your activities on earth known as karma. However, in reality, when the body is bound, it causes a disruption for itself in the future. Now always note, for what is born, death is certain, and for what is dead, birth is certain. And our entire life exists upon how we behave during the time of birth and death. In the world of Brahman, there is no hell or heaven, as they both exist in every individual. Wanting to go to either of them creates a never-ending desire and process. But attempting to go beyond them is the very foundation of which yoga is built upon. And that's the philosophy of yoga, and that's a wrap to this particular episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, do give it a thumbs up, and also do subscribe to this channel with notifications so that you don't miss out on any of our future videos. And also leave a comment down below on what is your experience of yoga. And as always, thank you for watching, and until the next episode, it is goodbye.